Transferred business school into this school.
Okay, so you're kind of out of state.
Yes.
I don't take that personally.
They have YouTube video.
They apparently they do. They make these available. I don't know if it's to people who are taking the class online or to they make me very self-conscious, so I pretend that they don't exist. And I'm definitely afraid of anybody else that I know having an interview with it. There's a sign-in sheet.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Tracy.
Chantel.
Nice to meet you. I think I've heard from you. There are a few people who respond by email, so
Hey, long time no see, right?
do not know.
Hello.
I'm Tracy. Hi. Oh, I wondered if there was a relationship. That's a good one. That's a good one. Is the place open?
Yeah.
Today, so maybe whenever.
The mic closed around 4.
It goes around 2.
I closed it before the end of class.
Yeah. So if I want iced coffee, I have to give us a break before. I should have brought it from home.
You can get it out before class. Or you can go get it out before class.
About before he walked away from the last class. There was another class here.
There's a sign-in sheet, so move it around. I don't know who contributed their pen, but you'll have to retrieve it at some point. Did you all have class this morning, or some of you just had class this morning?
Anybody need to sign this?
People after my own heart who actually write notes. Yeah.
I remember better.
So that's what I find. Sometimes even if I don't,
You write it and you see it.
if I don't do it, I do that even when I'm just sitting in a meeting of some kind. I'm not like super hyper punctual, but I just want to know, does anybody know Monica Cruz, Stephanie Gonzalez, Carlisha Plummer?
That's me.
Oh, that's you. So you just have gotten some issues. You're Carlisha?
Yes.
Because there were people I didn't hear from. So Antoine, I guess, is not.
Right here.
Oh, Antoine. All right. So did you get my email?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got it.
All right.
I didn't respond back.
It's okay. Antoine. And Daniel?
I can respond back to you. So.
Okay. As long as you got it, that's all. That's the bottom line.
You got it?
And Garrett Morton?
Yeah.
Like 35.
Anybody know Garrett Morton?
36, 38, 38.
20, right?
20 you rented from check?
Is he not on my class list? Maybe not really. What?
22 rand.
Is anybody here whose name was not on the sign-in sheet? No?
I rented it.
How'd you make it? You're still stressing that booster so stuff.
I mean, it's 22 rand.
Hey, Shan, not doing your business.
I'm taking it to
everything, huh? Shoot, the
Did
cowboy.
you get my email? An email from me, levelslayer@gtli.com.
He doesn't like
now, but I don't remember seeing it.
Okay, so it had a revised syllabus.
Oh.
No, doesn't ring a bell?
But I'll look right now.
Yeah, and then I'll check your email.
MC810?
MC810.
I know that that's
Yep.
here.
Okay, so here, if I had random email from a lawyer, I don't know, I might put it in my spam folder too, so.
Okay.
It might be highly questionable. Yes. Some people feel that way about lawyers. I've learned to take your jokes. Stephanie Gonzalez. We know Stephanie. Welcome. My name is Tracy Levenschlager.
Is that thing recorded?
It is, but we're gonna, again, I'm very self-conscious, so I'm gonna pretend it's not there. There was this information was on the syllabus, whether you got the old one that had been posted or the new one I sent out. I'm a shareholder with the law firm Greenberg Traurig. It's a really, really large firm. It's like 1,900 lawyers in 37 cities. Yes. And the interesting thing about the firm is that it started in Miami. One thing that's interesting for this class is that the firm started in Miami, and Bob Traurig, one of the founding partners, he did zoning and land use work in Miami when nobody else would do it. And it became one of the founding practices of the firm. And we do that kind of practice nationwide, but especially in Florida. It's just one of the characteristics of our firm is an appreciation for land use law. So I was happy when I came out of government practice to have an opportunity at a firm like Greenberg. My background previously as a lawyer. Out of law school, I went to work for the Broward County Attorney's Office, and I did land use regulation, and I did some environmental enforcement. And I realized after a time, even though that was my first love kind of intellectually, that I didn't always like being a regulator. I wanted to be part of building something. So an opportunity arose for me to go and represent the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport in the 90s when they were embarking on an expansion program. And I got to be part of the development team at Fort Lauderdale Airport that it did the planning for the south runway, which is now the new runway, added a terminal, did a design build contract for entrance roads, and I did all the construction contracting and claims litigation for about $600 million in the ground, and then I was tired. So I took a break and then started at Greenberg Traurig, and again I have a dual practice in land use and airports. I represent companies that operate at airports. Most of this should be familiar to you. We're going to use this nutshell as a textbook. When I walk, if people see me in the office with this, they're like, really? This is supposed to be your practice area and you need a cheat sheet? I'm like, students, I'm trying to save them time so that they don't have to read a really lengthy, overly legalistic book. So I think you'll find that to be helpful in getting you to a conceptual answer to a question pretty quickly. There's some other, you're all members of the ULI as students, is that right? Yeah. So you have access to the materials at ULI, and they're very good, really. They're very up to date. They tie policy together with business issues very well. And I do recommend substantively the ULI material. The reading schedule is in the updated syllabus that I sent you. I had previously taught this in 4 very long days, so I did my best to adjust the scheduling of the class to these 8 short classes. But in reality, I didn't. You'll see that I'm not sure where one day is going to end and the next is going to begin, but I don't think that precise matching of the reading to the class material is going to be an issue. I don't think that will be necessary for you. The class activities. One of the biggest projects we're going to do in this class is a case study. You're going to go into teams. You're going to do research into local government projects that have been approved recently. You're going to find one that meets the requirements of the case study, and you're going to analyze the project, how it was approved, what the regulatory issues were, what the community issues were, the political issues, and then tell us about the outcome of the project. Why it was approved, why it was not approved, and you're going to find the public records that support all of those findings. And what it will expose you to is a feel for this process. Every single city in which development occurs has a different process. They have similarities, but you cannot assume that any one local government is going to process the project the same way as the last one in which you worked. They all believe they're unique. That's the most important thing. The local government planners that you'll deal with think that their town is completely unique and their political scenario is unique, and it's important, and that's what you're walking into. They're protecting the interests of their town. They want you to follow their process. So the more nimble you become with looking at a local government process, comparing it to ones you have used before, seeing the differences, seeing the similarities, and working through the process at the local government the way it exists without fighting the process, the more quickly you can do that, the more successful, the more efficient your entitlement processes will be. So that will be the primary case study. We will spend time in class forming your teams and having you do research online to identify your case study subject so that I can be here to interact with you, guide you in the local government research, and answer questions about whether the project that you identify as a potential case study is going to meet the criteria for the assignment. There'll be a midterm exam. I've typically done the final exam the same way, which is I distribute it by email. There's a 24-hour period to complete it and return it by email. So it's open book, but and most of us don't have a complete 24 hours to commit to this one class. So it'll become a scheduling issue for you. You'll have plenty of notice, but the more prepared you are, the more efficiently you'll be able to complete the exam and return it.
Can you review the midterm?
Pardon?
Are you going to review the midterm? Will you do it?
Everything that's on the midterm will have been covered in class, and I will make my PowerPoint presentations available to you after the classes.
When will the midterm take place?
I think it will be. Probably September 17th. It will probably be on your time between September 17th and September 24th. So we'll talk about what day I'm going to release the midterm and you're going to return it, okay? And we'll talk about your schedules and what your other obligations are, and we'll pick a day that by consensus you all have the best opportunity to get it at noon and return it by noon the next day or whatever time we agree. I've set these emails up to go out at 11 o'clock at night if that was the gist of what worked best for everybody, because it gave them until 11 o'clock the following night, okay? And I didn't mean noon. If it's going to be a 24-hour period, complete it. And there'll be plenty of opportunities for questions. I want to give you a kind of a high-level idea of what the class is going to be about. Like I said, I'll send you a link to a Google Drive to get PowerPoint presentations. I have to resort the drives so that you're only getting ones as we cover them. Okay, you know a little bit about me. Now I'd like to learn a little bit about you. So let's do some introductions. Tell me your name, your undergraduate course of study, what your hopeful career path is to be part of this program, what you know about what you can gain from this course, and then a little bit about what you've learned in this program so far that's helpful to your existing work or to your planned future work. Are you ready to go first? We're going to start on that side.
Somebody go first.
Frederick?
Yeah,
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stand
Yeah, no,
up.
just say.
I'm Frederick Griffin. My undergraduate study was finance. I'm Griffin International Service. I'm a consultant for mining companies, precious minerals for Africa and Middle East areas. And I also do consulting work for government set aside program when better trying to get strike. So we do that.
For what kind of programs?
NA.
Okay.
And I'm using this program to facilitate all my international connections to get development projects over here in the U.S. So that they can take the money, but I won't take it this way.
Want to tell us about yourself?
Hi, I'm Diana Griffin, spouse of Frederick Griffin. My undergraduate degree was in marketing management, and what I hope to gain from this program is an understanding of real estate development so that I can assist Frederick as well as work on a project of my own. What I've gained from the program thus far is that you have to learn to work with other people. And people come from different understandings, different backgrounds, different expertises, but you have to learn to bring all of that together to facilitate whatever you're trying to accomplish.
Hello everyone, my name is Antoine Dahda. I'm from Venezuela. I did my undergraduate here at Nova in business management. So right now I'm focusing on what I would like to do in the future is development for low income and middle income houses. Let's say housing and all the housing development and working with CRA. And what I hope to gain from this course is having a major idea about how's the zoning working and how the entitlements work and where can I build, where can I not build, how many floors can I go up, how many, all this process. And what I've gained from this program so far, last semester I had development part 1, and I understand a whole idea of how to build a team and how to start developing and what do we need to learn this development process.
Have you done any work in development yet, or it's all been?
No, I'm thinking for a future. I'm really preparing right now. So my dream is to do something, to build something, develop something for a future.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jesus Suarez. I'm also from Venezuela. And my undergraduate is in law. So, well, I've been working in real estate since 2003 as a broker. Now I want to engage in a higher level, and so that's why I'm here studying real estate development, because I want to become a developer in the future. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Have you been a broker? What kind of on the commercial, residential? What side?
Both.
Both.
Residential and commercial, yes. But not here in the United States, in Venezuela and Panama. Yeah, not here. I'm only here. I'm in the United States since January, so I'm still learning English and everything, and everything works here. And well, I have been here in the master. I'm just beginning today, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
You learned how to find the building. That's what you did. Okay, next.
My name is Winston Villeja. I go by Ben. That's my middle name. But I went to Florida International University. Got an undergraduate degree in construction management. I'm a general contractor. I work for a construction firm doing commercial construction. I actually worked on the Wells Fargo Financial Center. I don't know if your offices are there, but I know Greenberg Court has a whole floor.
Oh, in Miami?
Yeah, in the Wells Fargo Financial Center. So,
Yeah, no, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, but it's a beautiful office, so well done.
yeah, did that with Suffolk back then, you know, a few years back. But you know, I do a lot of commercial construction, and maybe I'd like to do some development in the future, maybe not. But I do want to know, I do want to have a competitive advantage over, you know, my competition when I'm meeting with developers, and I understand what the whole process is. And I may choose to want to do so myself if the right opportunities arise, you know, to build. So that's kind of what I'm doing, and hoping to meet people in this program that do something different than I do, real estate professionals, development professionals, so.
Okay, next.
My name is Noah Leon, business administration. Currently, I'm kind of involved in all the facets of this real estate thing. I invest as well. I guess as far as entitlement goes, I do plan on doing development. I'd also like to get into marijuana entitlement, so speculative there.
Having, in the marijuana business?
Yes. I don't smoke, but I know it's a big box. So, it's something that I've thought about, and but for now, I'm just gonna develop residential, but you know, I guess it'd be classified as commercial, multifamily.
That's an interesting concept. Anytime you're building for a very highly regulated industry, healthcare comes to mind. It can be a whole different set of agencies you deal with, a whole different set of regulations that can really take you out of the norm of commercial. I'm surprised I know a guy who's a contractor who does nothing but build banks, because the security systems are proprietary, they're unique to banks. Only it's like you get sworn in with a secret handshake before you can build banks, and then so you keep building them because you've made the investment. Interesting.
Hi, I'm Chantel. Forgive me, I don't like talking about myself. But my name is Chantel from Oklahoma, if you couldn't tell. I went to the University of Oklahoma and I studied journalism. And I don't really have a career path yet, because since I graduated last semester, December, I started this program. So I don't have a career path yet. I'm hoping to gain, I'm just like a sponge. I just really want to soak up everything I can and learn everything to do the planning and design in the next set of 8 weeks. So I'm hoping to enjoy both of those courses. And what I want to do, I want to get into hotels and like the development and or redevelopment of residential projects. So
I approve of having an open mind coming into something like this. When I was in law school, I did not know what I wanted to do. And the stars just lined up. I took a land use course, probably because it fit my schedule. And I interned for a city attorney in Delray Beach at the same time while they were preparing a zoning case for trial. So I got to, it was a lot of copying documents for them, but I got to then sit through the trial of a zoning case while I was having the academic experience of learning about zoning, and it all just clicked. And I said, that's what I want to do. So you never know when it's all going to come together for you. Okay, are you ready now?
Sure.
All right.
My name is Carlisha Plummer. I have a BS in finance. I got it in Colorado. I was in the military, so I've been moving all around. Just moved to Florida. First time in Fort Lauderdale today. So, let's see, my career path. I'm not sure. Right now, I'm in audit and compliance, auditing banks for their mortgage processes and housing laws and all that stuff. So I really just want to have a working knowledge of commercial real estate in case there's something that I ever want to, something I want to do. It's just very interesting to me, so I just want to at least see exposure. Yeah, get some exposure. So what I can gain from this course, everything, because I know nothing at this point about commercial real estate, and if I have to, maybe one day I'll take what I've learned here and move back to Chicago, where I'm originally from, and develop some projects out there. So
So pay close attention to the political side of what we learn if you're going to develop develop in Chicago. Sir, next.
Hi, my name is Hugh Cunningham. I've been in the real estate investment side for over 30 years. I've only applied myself towards residential, and now I feel as if I want to switch because it's getting very crowded. A lot of people are doing today what I did 30 years ago. I'm not making as much money as I used to, so I need to find a different outlet for my time. So I decided to proceed into this project. This is actually my first class in real estate law.
Hi everyone, I'm Christy Clinton. I have my bachelor's degree from Florida Memorial University in criminology. I'm actually a public administration for the master's program. So I hope to gain from this course what I learned in the public administration. You have to learn every facet in the government or a nonprofit. So I hope to gain any information I can to another part of government. And my career path, I'm still figuring out, but I know I want to work for the government, and I'm soon working for the Senate in November.
Public administration in Florida, so much depends on ad valorem taxes deriving from the land. So you increase the land value by developing it, and it directly feeds into the coffers of the local government for everything from, you know, parks and healthcare, and so it's how the land is developed gives a public administration person, let's say you're a budget analyst for a local government, the tools to build the budget. Okay.
My name is Monica Cruz. I am undergraduate in Nova Business. I've been in business, I've been doing preschools for 20 years. I recently developed and built a preschool, you know, from the very surface all the way up, and I decided that I wanted to continue doing this, building to specs, but just, you know, selling the schools. I also hope to start dabbling in other retail property and converting warehouse space and CRA developments and things like that. So that's why I'm here.
My name is Dale Grant. I graduated from Northeast University with a bachelor's degree in business administration with a focus in finance. And what I'm trying to get out of with this degree is that I currently work for a boutique building firm, which also focuses on private equity and investment. And we're currently in the process of working with international real estate projects. So I asked the seniors within the firm if I could take a degree program in real estate development so I can learn the inner workings and the tools needed to look into real estate development, and so I can specialize within the field.
Okay. Well, we certainly have a diverse class. I think that's going to be valuable to all of you to get exposed to other disciplines. Very nice to meet you all. Okay. This is a pretty, parts of this course will be somewhat academic. The basis of land use regulation in law in the United States, and it goes back a century and a quarter. But when we go back there and pick up the bits and pieces of that historical development of this area of the law, it's good to understand why am I doing this? Why do I need to know this? It's like sitting in a calculus class going, really? Do I really ever need this ever again? People who took calculus. I went to law school because I was promised there would be no math. So, no math for me. My kids didn't have it. So what are the things to be gained from an understanding of land use regulation as an academic understanding, and then the process of entitlement? So you'll learn how development approval contributes to land value. You'll get an understanding of the social, political, and legal implications of real estate ownership and development. I'm going to stop there for a second. We're going to spend some time on this, on the social. When you walk into a community and you see a prime piece of land and you want to make a development. You explore it, you put it under contract, you want to do a development, you're walking into an existing community that has its own history, its own culture, its own history of struggles and successes, its own educational trends, and you need to understand the social fabric of the community you're walking into with the development proposal. It's because you'll end up kind of sharp elbows if you don't get to know that culture a little bit when you come in with your project. Political and legal implications of real estate ownership. In Florida specifically, and in many local governments around the country, the approval of land development is a very local process. The very lowest level of government, that is the city council, the town council. In other parts of the country, they're aldermen or whatever that local body. They are the closest to the ground, that is the closest to the people, and they're the ones who approve development in most areas in the United States. So the political framework that you're walking into, is it an election year? Who's up for election? What are their issues? What are their hot buttons? What have they been burned on before? You have to get an understanding of those things before you walk in with a project too. And then the legal implications. I think most of you understand the legal implications of owning land. You know, you become responsible for what happens on it, you have to pay the taxes on it, all of those things. But the legal process of obtaining approvals and understanding when it is certain, when you have a buttoned up set of entitlements and what you have to do to keep them. You need to know, is there a time limit on this? I've obtained this approval, I could go pull building permits tomorrow, but you know, the market has changed. I want to sit on this and see if there's still a market for this project. You need to know how long your entitlements are good. You need to know what you have to do to vest them and make them certain. You need to know what the conditions are that were associated with your approval so that you can meet them. And the local government can't pull that entitlement away from you again because you failed to meet the conditions. These are the legal implications that are unique to land development. Develop a realistic expectation of the time and expense required to obtain them. This is the hardest thing that my clients struggle with. They say, how long will it take me to get building permits for this project? And I can lay out a schedule for them. They're like, really? How can it can't possibly take that long. If I turn in an application, why is it going to take them 6 weeks to give me comments? You're nodding your head. The time that is required to get things through local government will shock you. But if you know it going in, then you underwrite it properly, and you're not shocked by it. So understanding the complexities of it is part of making a correct and accurate schedule, so you can understand, so you can underwrite your carrying costs for an appropriate period of time. So understand the rules of local, state, and federal regulatory agencies. More than once, someone has come into my office and they show me an approval. And they're like, look, I've got everything I need. I should get my building permits. But they say I have to go to the South Florida Water Management District. What is the South Florida Water Management District? And there are multiple levels of government regulation, and you need to understand what power each of those levels have and at what point they're going to enter your project approval, therefore how early you need to put a fire under your team to get those approvals started so that they all come together at the right time. Or I have a beautiful vacant land and it's just got some pretty grasses blowing in the wind, and there's a little dip over there that might have been a pond once upon a time. What do you mean I need a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers to fill that soft spot? That's a federal agency that lives far, far away and doesn't care about your project. Those are the interlocking approvals that you need to understand. Understand the effective land use planning and development systems on the local tax base. So I was talking a little bit about that. In Florida, we don't have an income tax. You know, everything is funded by sales tax and ad valorem tax. The more value that's added to the land, the more tax revenue. Understand that dynamic. That is sometimes going to be the motivational point, that a city where you want to build, if they need the tax revenue and they need the jobs associated with your project, you can't threaten them, but you have to show them the benefits. That, you know, really, a few neighbors will meet with them, will find a way to make them happy. Don't kill this project and the 200 construction jobs and the 200 units of affordable housing that are going to come out of this, and the tax value that are going to be added. But so you need to understand those benefits so you can help the elected officials see the benefits and support your project. Identify stakeholders in the development approval process and learn how to work with them. One of the things we're going to do near the end of this class is a mock public hearing. You're going to play the parts of the developer, the development team, the elected officials, the city staff, and the neighborhood opposition. And you're going to adopt the position of those roles in a development approval problem. You're going to put on the case, and you're going to play those roles, and then you're going to switch. And you might even switch again, so that you have to advocate the position of the other player and understand a project from their perspective. And those are the big players. Sometimes there are others, but your own project team and your investors. Then there's the city staff that reviews the project. There are the elected officials that probably make the decision about the project. And there's the neighborhood that you're invading with your project. And those stakeholders, and then there are other regulatory agencies. Sometimes a school board will drop in because they're having crowding problems. And they're not directly in the development approval process in Florida, but they want to be, because they don't want a whole bunch of residential built that they can't accommodate in their schools. So those are other potential outlying stakeholders that you'll have to identify, contact, build a relationship, and win over. So this is understanding the difference between legislative, quasi-judicial, and judicial processes. There are certain decisions of local government that are legislative that are completely cloaked in discretion. They don't really need to have a good reason for them. And you have to understand that those decisions are very hard to appeal and very hard to challenge because they're discretionary. But then you have to understand which parts of your process are more like getting a decision out of a judge. And what do you do to get the right decision, and what can you do to appeal it if it's the wrong decision? And then the actual judicial process will touch on what happens when all else fails and the local government has treated you improperly under the law. Where do you go? How do you get there? And what are the time frames that are usually involved? Ethical issues. Because local government decisions are made by local elected officials most often, they need to get reelected, and they often need help. And the development community is one source of support for elected officials in their election campaigns. And you can find yourself in a meeting, being asked a question, being asked to do something, and you weren't prepared for it. You don't know if you're allowed to say yes. You don't know if you want to say yes. You don't know if you say yes and you shouldn't have, what the effect could be on your project. So although you need to form relationships with these people, you need to understand the ethical constraints and be prepared before you're in an uncomfortable meeting with an elected official who makes an ask. And you need to know what you can do for them legitimately without finding yourself being asked by the FBI to wear a recording device. Develop an understanding of the scope, the expertise of all the members of your development team. What does the developer do? What can your lawyer do for you, and what you shouldn't ask your lawyer to do because frankly they're too expensive to do that. a lobbyist, an engineer, traffic engineer, surveyor, architect, landscape architect, environmental engineer, and contractor. Understand what role each of them is going to play in an entitlement and development process. That's what I was describing, we're going to have a public hearing. We're going to have a pretend public hearing. If there is a public hearing on an actual project that occurs in the 2 months that we're together, that I can identify, I'll make you aware of it. If you want to go sit through an actual public hearing in Fort Lauderdale or somewhere else, I'll let you know. But usually the scheduling is too difficult in the window of this class. I've taught this class in the summer when, frankly, local governments just shut down. So I've never been able to get my class to an actual public hearing, and which is why I created the theatrics. But if there is one, I will let you know, and maybe we can go sit and see it. But get a feel for what happens, what might happen, what you might need to step up to the podium and say to get your project approved. All right, questions about the scope of the class or the introduction to some assignments that we've made so far, just overall. I keep meaning to delete the slide, but this little guy with his hand up is so cute. Okay. So the big picture is we want each of you to be prepared to actively participate in the entitlement process so you can add value to real estate, protect your community, and enhance your investment. And apart from the financial side of your business, that you're going to work with a developer to build a new project, you're going to invest in a project, you're going to participate as a contractor or a consultant, there is that community side to the project that you're entering the community. And, you know, in reality, apart from seeing the community as a potential destroyer of your project, you have to recognize that you want to enhance. I mean, I think most of us, when we put our head on the pillow at night, we want to know that our work is contributing to the improvement of our community. And that's something you should always underlie your development decisions with. Creating quality of life. You'll have an opportunity to create places that are memorable, that build a character for a community, creating linkages. That idea is, I mean, you'll encounter it in a lot of material in this program. Pedestrian, you know, developments shouldn't just be automobile oriented now, they should be pedestrian friendly. We should activate the sidewalk in the pedestrian realm and link people. So it's not just a building, but do things in your projects that will link the users of the project to their own community and to each other. It's just a different way of thinking that people are going to use the project that are going to be part of the same community. Is there a question?
Yes. So I was reading an article recently about how, I guess, Wilton Manors is going to actually constrict the streets to create a greater walking space or public living. So won't that affect infrastructure? And then it's a city, essentially it's the city's streets, but it kind of affects even the outliers of the city, correct? So
Sure.
then how would something like that get balanced between the infrastructure and kind of the communal living?
Well, all right, so let's think about the implications of narrowing a street. So you've got 2 lanes going in each direction, you've got a small median, you've got a 5-6 foot sidewalk on either side, and no street trees. No trees providing shade to the sidewalk. Typical Florida suburban development scenario. So they want to reduce it to 1 lane in each direction, and the question is why? What's the impact of that? So you're slowing down traffic. What do you do with the space? You widen the sidewalk, you add a bicycle lane, you make room for tree wells to put trees in to shade this widened sidewalk. So what you're doing is you're drawing pedestrians, you're drawing bicycles, and you're discouraging automobile traffic. But where's it going to go? That's the other part.
Right,
So
because the other streets, I mean, the outliers are all going to be affected.
Yeah, are you guys familiar with downtown Delray Beach? So they built one-way pairs on either side of Atlantic Avenue. So if really all you want to do is drive through, they direct you to a one-way that goes around it. So, but it's a planning process. And the businesses that are on that street are going to howl or they're going to clap, depending on if their business benefits from more flyby traffic or more pedestrians. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been around Delray Beach, specifically downtown. It's like very narrow streets, but also there's not much parking in that area as well. No parking garages or anything like that. So what's the best way of increasing business versus having more pedestrians? So more businesses having people just walking around more.
So the businesses that are going to succeed in that kind of redevelopment scenario are the ones that benefit from walking traffic. Not a big box. There won't be room, there won't be traffic, there won't be a furniture store, even a small furniture store, you know, that's going to be hard. Clothing boutiques, that's pretty good. Coffee shops, it's made for coffee shops, right?
I guess my question was more, you got two cities that are bordering each other, they're split here, and if one city constricts the infrastructure, all that overflow is going to go through the other city. So how do the cities between them, I don't even know if they deal between each other, but how does that extra or excess overflow that now they just say they shut down the street and now they're cut around?
I have a real example of this.
Okay.
In Northwest Fort Lauderdale, the city of Fort Lauderdale wanted to do this on Sistron, Northwest 6th Street, it's called. And Broward County fought it for 10 years because their traffic model showed that the traffic that came from the western suburbs into downtown, that Broward Boulevard and other throughways would become so heavily overloaded if Sistron couldn't be used
So the
as
county.
an east. So the county fought it and successfully fought it for many years. And eventually they were able to come to agreement, the city commission and the county commission, on a project. But it took a long time. But those elected officials using their staff to speak to one another is the only way it gets resolved. And you have those discussions with data, saying you can't just assume. It's like I was there one day for 1 hour and I'm telling you at 5 o'clock, if all this traffic gets pushed down to Broward, nothing's going to move. That's anecdotal, that's one person's observation. You need studies, you need traffic engineering studies, and they need to lay tapes in the road and they need to count cars and they need to crunch the numbers so that, let's say we're helping the city get this kind of project approved. They go to the county traffic engineers and say, it's not going to be that bad, and here's why. So you need data for those discussions because they can be very emotional. The community at Northwest Fort Lauderdale felt neglected, and they saw this as an opportunity to revitalize what had been a historic, inner city downtown. And the big bad city and all of the affluent people living in the western part of the county were telling them no. That's how the debate became characterized. So you take some of the vitriol out of it and you get down to the data. You'll be equipped by this program, not entirely this class, of course, to anticipate those issues, get the right people on board, get the studies done, and use the data to understand how to resolve the conflict. That's how it happens. It takes a very long time when there is a conflict between adjacent municipalities or between two different local governments. Part of the problem is that they don't often talk directly to each other. It takes like months to schedule a joint meeting of a city commission and a county commission. It's like, it's the public, the sunshine law, the this, the that, it's complicated. But that's how it happens. So linkages, benefit your community. So you want, whether you need it to get approval or not, you want to build projects that are going to benefit the community. You're leaving them behind. That's, in a sense, a legacy that you and your company are going to have. Make it a good one. You want to do something enduring. You want to build a project that's not going to be abandoned and have some poor redevelopment planner scratching their head over what am I gonna do with this 10 years later. You want to build something that can adapt to market changes. Make a mark for future generations, establish a vision, or reinvent a community. Some of you have talked about wanting to work in CRA scenarios. That's what community redevelopment agencies are all about, is trying to get partnerships together and try to get focused on redeveloping areas that have been neglected. Okay. So, land use law, land use regulation. How many of you feel that once you own a piece of land, you should be able to do anything with it that the market will bear?
No.
You do?
I mean, I just purchased a house this week, and now I want to expand the yard and move my fence to it's possible all the way I can, as far as I can go. So I'm trying to fight coconut creek on that.
Okay. So you feel like it's my property.
Yeah.
If I'm not hurting anybody, directly harming anyone, I should be able to do anything I want with my property.
But I know it's not true.
Okay. Does anybody else sort of lean that way? You feel that way? No? You're all regulators, huh? How many of you think that the ownership of property, it's a stewardship? Public interest is primary. No one should get to do anything with their property unless the community agrees.
It's a little extreme.
Yeah.
You just said two opposite sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I did. Okay, how many of you think you should be able to do something reasonable with your property that gives you a good return on your investment and is compatible with the neighborhood? There we go. Now we have to figure out, how do we get there? How do we get consensus? How do we know what that happy medium point is? And what can be done in law to achieve that? It's like there's an old Supreme Court case about First Amendment rights, actually, about pornography, where there's this judge said, I can't define it, but I know when I see it. Okay, we can't, it's difficult to define that happy medium when a government has to behave like a government and a business has to behave like a business, and a neighborhood feels like they didn't even know they had any rights until this, big box store came and wanted to move in, and that causes them to coalesce into a community. So in Florida, we have a statute that requires the adoption and implementation of comprehensive plans. That was done in the 70s. We'll go through this whole timeline. And then really given some teeth in the 80s. But long before that, there was simply a zoning enabling statute. And I want you to understand where zoning regulation came from in the law, so you understand what it can achieve and what it can't. So the origins, we're going to explore all these, and what is the purpose of land use regulation and who's responsible for administering it. So we just kind of went through this. Should it be always permitted? Who should permit it? What should be the controlling factors? This quote, I find, this is just a definition of highest and best use. How many of you have ever read an appraisal, a land appraisal? Okay, so you've seen this phrase. That's the definition that appraisers use when they value land. The reasonably probable and legal use of vacant land or an improved property that is physically possible, legally permissible, appropriately supported, financially feasible, and that results in the highest value. There's a lot of factors in that, and that's just what an appraiser would use to value a piece of land. There are some related topics that we'll touch on. Eminent domain. Do you know what eminent domain is? The condemnation, the taking of land for public use. Regulatory takings, zoning. You probably thought that zoning was the only thing we were doing here. Zoning is just one aspect of this. And then a little bit about planning as a field of study. So why should government intervene in land use markets at all?
Because of neighbors.
Because of neighbors? Because
Well,
neighbors are complaining?
if you affect the enjoyment of someone else's property with whatever you're doing on theirs.
Because neighbors are going to complain if they don't.
No,
There's going to be
because government has police power, and any these modifications can create a nuisance for your neighbors, right, or for your community.
Okay, looking at it from an international point of view, I'm from Jamaica, and I see what happens when the government does not intervene. For instance, you'll build a $2 million home, residential property, and your neighbor decides to put up a supermarket next door. Okay, and I've seen this in Jamaica.
Because there's no land use regulation.
Right. Now they're starting to get, the ideas that they need to regulate something. And then it creates a big friction between the supermarket and the residential area.
Okay.
And that has led to people being murdered and whatever.
Okay, that's extreme. But the supermarket affects the value of the adjacent land. Then when it's allowed to be built in a, let's say, an incompatible location, the supermarket looks at the residential and says, oh, all these people are going to shop at my store. But the cast-off effects of a supermarket damage the value of the surrounding residential area, and there's no control. Okay. So government should intervene to prevent those kinds of conflicts. Is there, the earliest, Daniel?
Another reason why a government would go in, apply eminent domain, let's say with transportation. If the government wants to build a railroad or like some form of transportation along a plot of land, but one property owner rejects that, then that affects not only the local but also the state and the federal owners in a large way in terms of economic value.
Okay, so you're connecting two of these topics. The local governments, sometimes railroad companies, power companies, other private parties are given the power of eminent domain. So government has the power to take land for public purpose, and we'll cover it, but there are constitutional requirements that they pay for it and other things. But that's the extreme version of controlling land, right? You buy it, you take it, and you take control of it. You have control from the center of the earth to the sky now over that land. Regulatory, it's not a regulatory issue because you own the land. And then, but what we're talking about here is to what extent should government not take the land, but tell you what you can and cannot do with your privately owned land.
What about in historical
That's we'll do a brief section on historic regulations. In some communities, because of historic value, the regulations are even more stringent, and what you can do with your property is even more constrained. Hang on just a minute. And these let's say the early 20th century is when some of these concepts began to develop in law. They saw a need for order and beauty in the cities and saw land use regulation as opposed to condemnation, which is always available to government. But the government can't own all the land, at least in our, in our scenario, in our capitalistic world. So they saw land use regulation as a means of resolving conflicts in the use of land. So I'm trying to think of a good movie example of like New York in the early 20th century.
Gangs in New York.
What is it?
Gangs in New York.
Yes, that's the one, but I can never watch it because it's too violent and I have to cover my eyes. Okay, I've revealed too much about myself. But what do you see? You see 7-story tenements built chock-a-block, one against another, tiny little rooms with no ventilation, with no access to sewage unless it's dumping a bucket out on the street. No place for animals to be kept who were involved in transportation at that period of time. So their sewage is hitting the street, so their material is hitting the street also. No place to hang clothes to dry, no place to store food because they're tiny little rabbit warren rooms. So that was what developed in cities in the early 20th century without land use regulation. And the barons, the great industrial barons whose townhouses were overlooking some of this were like, we don't like this. We don't like looking down on this mess. And we need to build a beautiful city. But I'm not going to own all the land and build it myself. People own this land. What can be done? You know, city, who was one of the mayors of New York at that time? What can be done to control these people who are throwing up these, you know, cheap tenements? We've got to stop this. That's where land use regulation was born in reality. So it started without the benefit of comprehensive regulation in nuisance law. How many of you know what a tort is? You heard the term a tort, okay? So when you see buses go by and somebody says, call me when you have your car accident, I'll get you the most money, personal injury lawyers, what they're doing is they're trying tort cases. Somebody in a private action injures another person, they get to sue them, take them to court, prove that they've been damaged by that other person's action, and then they collect damages. There's an aspect of tort law that's called nuisance. One of the things that a person could sue another person over was, you're causing a nuisance and it's damaging me. So the supermarket that comes in and builds next to the $2 million home, he could, in theory, in the United States, sue and say that's a nuisance and you've reduced the value of my home by $100,000 and that's the damage you should pay me. So that was where the concept of land use regulation got started, was in cases that were determined based on claims of private nuisance. Private nuisance cases then became, in some instances, public nuisance. So if the entire neighborhood around a supermarket was being affected by the fact that the supermarket was throwing all the old vegetables out and not just, I'm making these things up, was not disposing of their trash properly and it was affecting the entire neighborhood, someone could sue and say, this is creating a public nuisance. But we're still in the realm of tort law. It's not regulatory. It's just a complaint about a specific set of facts that happened at a particular time. That's nuisance law. Let me see how far I go with this. We're going to spend some time on nuisance and the police power and the extreme eminent domain, but I want you to associate these extremes. The extreme is I can do anything I want unless somebody sues me for nuisance, or the government takes all the land and they control it. That's how they control it, because they own the land. That's eminent domain. And then land use regulations comes up in that medium, that happy medium that we want to find. Let's see if we can make this all work by adopting regulations that will be administered evenly to everyone, and everyone knows what they're getting into.
In a situation, take for example the supermarket, the structure is now there, it's operational, then could there be some type of countersuit from another party saying it would be a nuisance for the supermarket to leave because now they'll have to travel 10 additional miles?
I don't know. I mean, this is kind of more legalese, but there's an idea in law that you have to have a specific interest in a case to bring an action.
If it creates a burden on you, then you have a right to be.
I don't want to take our little illustration too far, and that's kind of going too far. It's not really useful at that point for what we're doing.
No, I was just curious.
Yeah. So these are the beginnings were nuisance law, but it had some limitations, and we'll go back to nuisance because we're going to look at a few cases. You probably, if you've done any reading, you might have encountered some of these cases in the reading already. So we're still looking kind of big picture. This quotation I just found interesting because it assumes the worst in humanity. Unless restrained by some external force or internal command, mankind incessantly exploits and ultimately despoils or destroys natural environments. Somewhere in the frenzied pursuit of more material possessions and a higher living standard, it is morally necessary to think about what kind of world will be passed along to future generations. So that's a pretty dark view of humankind, right? People obviously who haven't taken this class and had to think about the big picture items of, of entering a community and trying to build an enduring project. But that's, so but understand there are some folks who spend their entire career on the regulatory side of this. And really they see, perhaps they've seen so much bad behavior that this is what they expect. Every single developer who walks in the door is evil in just this way. And they feel as though that's what they're contending with to protect their community. So, I mean, be aware. I wish that I could take all of the regulators and send them into the private world for a few years and let them get a feel for what it's like on the private side and then go back into their regulatory work to have some balance. But some of the governments that you'll encounter, some of the agencies, they presume that you're trying to harm the community and that they're the last defense. So understand they feel passionately about their community. Don't take it personally. So these are the questions that we've talked about so far. Whether land use decisions should be entirely market-based. And we know that they're not, and we also have a sense that we don't want to live in a city either, where all the land use decisions are market-based. Purely technical. You know, should they be so bloodless that all they are is charts, and if you can design a project that fits within the criteria of the chart, there's no review, there's no aesthetic review, there's no sense of impact to the community. Should they be that technical? I mean, it treats everyone the same. It removes emotion. It entitles people to increase the value of their property without being unfairly discouraged. Should they be design focused and exclusively aesthetically focused? You'll find if, do any of you work, well, you've worked in downtown Miami, where there's a form-based zoning code. Have any of you encountered what's called a form-based code yet? It's kind of a new thing. I think it's the architecture, or the Architect's Bill of Relief, actually, because only architects can interpret these codes very well. But it tries to focus less on the technical and more on the form. Less on what's going on in the building, and does it really matter what's going on in the building as long as the building fits in the block and the look and the feel of the building is suitable for the site. Form. They're much more focused on form than they are in use. Structure to serve public policy. Should land use regulation advance public policy goals like inclusive housing, to include people, old people, young people, poor people, rich people, people of all faiths, people of all ages? You know, aging in place is a difficult issue in the cities in the United States right now. Most housing options are not suitable for people as they get older and need a different set of structural supports. That's why they end up moving to an old folks home. So is that something that should drive development decisions? Yeah.
For example, in New York City, a lot of private buildings have what they call private spaces. I mean, public spaces within private buildings. So like during specific time of day, they'll allow the public to use that space within the building.
Is the ability of the public to access private amenities, is that a critical criteria? Should it be a critical criteria for getting a project approved? Should anybody have to make some of their property available to the public? It's their property.
Yes. Beach use. I know of a situation where a building, to get access to the beach, you have to use the building to get.
So it's an easement.
I don't know if it's an easement from the
Let's
city.
not focus on the mechanics right now, but just the policy.
Right.
Is it reasonable for government to say you can't build unless you give something to the public?
It's
As a
good way to
policy.
get
Wait,
price.
just a second. Let me get one more here. Question.
Oh, so, do you think something similar may have happened when they were building the Alvin Sherman Library? Because this morning we were told that the county pays for some of, or
I don't know if it's a county or something, but Broward County, is that what it is?
Yeah.
They pay for some portion of it to give the school money so that public, just regular residents and people in the city or whatever can use the library. So is that kind of along the lines of what we're?
Well, in a sense, because Nova is a privately owned university, but I think in that case, both sides partnered voluntarily. So Nova benefited because the county contributed funds to the building of the library, and then the county had to make sure that there was public benefit to the for the funds that had been contributed.
Oh, that was a joint effort. Okay,
That
so
was a
Broward
joint-
didn't say, hey, Nova,
No.
you have, okay.
No, but let me think of an example. Okay. You're building, you have a commercial development. It's in a neighborhood that is really only beginning to commercialize, so there are 2-lane roads. But you're gonna put a small commercial project, so they say dedicate right-of-way. Give us land for the future expansion of the road. Does that seem fair to you? You're bringing a commercial project, there's gonna be more traffic. Someday, we're gonna build it someday, we're not sure when, but we want you to give us the land now. And then we'll approve your project. Those are the kind of policy questions we'll deal with, yeah?
I was with the Graham companies about maybe a semester ago, and I sat down with Stuart Wiley when he got his comprehensive plan back, and they were selling the land to I want to say it's the American Super Dream Mall.
Oh, is this in Miami Lakes?
Yeah, and so he was going over it, and he was saying essentially they're going to end up having to build new infrastructure that everyone can use because it's just so massive. And then the other issue they're having is the permeable land. They're going to end up paying other people for the runoff to essentially siphon off
Take the stormwater?
Right, siphon off the water.
And, okay, you all kind of felt that the middle road in regulation should be there, that there should be some regulation to control land development. It shouldn't all be market driven. That's a broad road. So how much? The big policy is, yes, a developer can be required to contribute to infrastructure or public amenities that will be used by the public in general. If you buy into that concept generally, how much? How much is enough? How much is too much? How do you determine what that is? So if you're building a project of a size, should you need to build the entire fire station? Okay, they need to extend fire service to serve your project. But is it reasonable for one project to bear the entire cost of a fire station, let's say, that's going to serve an entire area of the city? Or might it be to contribute $20,000 or $30,000 into a fund that's going to be used to build the fire station someday? But where that appropriate line is very difficult. That's what land use law is made up of, are cases where someone said, I'm willing to do it, but this is just too much. It's just not fair for me to bear the burden of the public impact, of all the public here. And going to court to fight about it. That's where most of land use law is made. Should it be driven by availability of public facilities to support development? That at least takes the emotion out of it. If that's going to be the basis for land use regulation, or one of them, that makes sense, doesn't it? Okay, if you're going to build a hotel with a certain number of rooms, it has a certain number of toilets flushing, and you can calculate exactly how much sewer capacity you need to support that hotel. It makes sense for the local government to ensure that the sewer capacity is there, right? And that's quantifiable. It's not emotional. You know it's not going to be too much or too little because you can count toilets. And you know how many gallons per day are needed. So those facilities driven, development review that is driven by the availability of public facilities, at least it is supported by data. And as a developer, you know, okay, it makes sense to me, I'm building apartments, I've got small apartments, big apartments, it makes sense that somebody will tell me I'm gonna generate so many students and that they need that many spaces in the school system for that many students. Okay, I get it, I'm not gonna fight about that. And the government can be constrained to only require of the developer the contributions that can be supported by that kind of analysis. So these are some of the bases on which land use controls do get developed. Technical things like bulk and density, design and aesthetically focused, designed to advance public policies that are much more amorphous, like we would like this neighborhood to include all kinds of people. That's a pretty generic, open-ended policy. And then to be driven by the availability of public facilities to support that specific development. These are the basis on which the development regulations that you encounter will have been formed. Okay, so let's go back to for a while to one end of the spectrum. One response that the government can make to the use of land is to simply buy it. That gives the government the maximum amount of control. And you can see, and Daniel was describing situations in which you can understand why government would use the power of eminent domain. Because a road needs to go in a certain direction. And it needs to go through a certain area to serve a purpose. And the fact that there's one or more holdout owners who don't want to sell can't be allowed to stop the development of a road where a road is needed. Or a water line where a water line is needed, or a sewer, or so on. So that's what eminent domain is really, is created in law to give the power to government to acquire land for essential public services. Yeah.
Now, when they use eminent domain, do they purchase the property at market value? And if so, say if there's a lot of foreclosures in the area, do they take that into consideration because that drop the value of that property? Do they keep that value, or how that what value?
Well, eminent domain is, I mean, if you remember your history, the federal government said that we only have the power that is given to us by the people, really. So, and then that the power to conduct government gets passed down. So, government only has the power that is given them in statute, typically by eminent domain. You know, the law that came to us from England, the king had all the power, right? And he could use it however he wished. In our government, eminent domain is constrained by statutes. So there's a set of federal statutes that tell the federal government when they can use eminent domain and how. And there's a set of statutes in each state that control who can exercise eminent domain, which governments, and how they have to do it. So, but the Constitution says no private property shall be taken for public use without compensation. The federal Constitution says just compensation. The state constitution in Florida says full compensation, which is a difference with the meaning in Florida. So yes, they have to pay compensation. How the compensation is defined becomes part of the law of the state where the eminent domain is occurring. So there's always a statute and there's a set of case law that will govern how property is developed in eminent domain, how property is valued rather. But some of the concepts that are a little bit more difficult to deal with is defining the property. What is the property that's being taken? If I'm putting a road through, but you could build, you could build over it. You could have balconies coming out over it, or you could have buildings, you could make it into a virtual tunnel. What exactly did the government buy? Did they just buy the surface use, or did they buy the air? Or did they buy the ground underneath? We don't really have, in this area of Florida, a lot of mining issues, but in parts of the country, the right to mine property beneath is a whole separate and separable right mineral rights from the right to use the surface. So when the government contemplates eminent domain, they have to determine what do we really need for the project that we want to do. What is the project, and is that a public use? There was a case, why is it, the name escaping me right now. The Supreme Court decided it was a redevelopment case in the Northeast, and they upheld the right of the local government to condemn land, take it from an owner, and give it to a developer, a private developer, to redevelop. And the Supreme Court said that under the laws there, that was permitted. And all over the country, people went nuts. And statutes were adopted in state after state, including Florida, that said, no, in Florida you can't do that. You can't take property from one private owner and give it to another, even for a redevelopment project.
I think that was in Connecticut.
It was it could be, I said, like, I knew it was in the Northeast.
Because I think it was either in New Haven or New London, because there was like a lot of light in that area, so
Sure.
the city wanted to.
The name will come to me. I'll probably feel guilty for not knowing it. I'll get it to you later. But the Supreme Court actually upheld that under the statutes in effect there, it was allowed. And communities all over the country were outraged by it, and statutes were modified in many states to prohibit that from being done. Yep.
What about, that, with that same scenario, the, community is a blighted community. The developer is going to come in and redevelop and bring in jobs and all of that, and the government is saying, okay, that's for public benefit.
That was the nature of the argument, yes. Redevelopment plans for redevelopment activities to occur at all, there has to be that kind of public purpose finding behind it. And, I mean, like I said, the Supreme Court said, no, that's a sufficient public purpose, you can do it. But communities and people all over the country were outraged by the decision, and there was a kind of a backlash, and statutes were modified to prohibit it in many states. I know it's true in Florida. If for example, a CRA condemns land, and then they don't want to keep it and use it, but they want it to be privately developed, I think they have to give an opportunity to the original owner to buy it back, or something like that. I can't remember exactly, I'm not eminent domain law. So these are and then is that right absolute? So if, what's another example? So the public purpose has to be.
Mary Brickell in Fort Lauderdale with the waterway.
Where?
Fort Lauderdale on New River.
Yeah.
There was a case, City of Fort Lauderdale versus Mary Brickell, because she owned the land along the waterways, and they said that it was detrimental to the city to have those parcels
In private ownership?
Yeah.
Was this an old case?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was real old.
Sometimes that case might not have been decided that way today. I'll put it that way, but it was crucial to the development of Fort Lauderdale that the government was given that power.
That's what they said.
At the time? Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. A case that I was peripherally involved with. The county wanted to expand the airport, but there was residential. There were residential areas.
I was in a very other situation.
It was. West of I-95 from Fort Lauderdale Airport were areas that had been residential for many years, and they were going to be impacted by the noise of the lengthening of the runway. And they wanted to do something less than eminent domain. They were going to soundproof or buy easement rights over and do different things. But the community kind of flared up and said, no, take us all, get us out of this neighborhood, and all or nothing. Don't leave a house here and a house there and then all this vacant property. Eventually the county began an eminent domain project taking all of the residential land in a broad area. But some judges, when they would go to court, if they couldn't reach an agreement with the property owner, some judges, at least one, actually said, no, eliminating a residential use from a noisy airport area is not a sufficient public purpose for the use of eminent domain. And the county had to appeal it, and he was reversed, but you don't know until you get in front of a judge if the judge is going to agree that yes, this is an appropriate use of eminent domain. What about for a park? No one's going to die if they don't have a park. Is it appropriate for local government?
Central Park, you die if they didn't have it.
It's true, they would all kill each other. Is it? But you can understand, you know, a judge scratching their head over that. Is this really a valid use of eminent domain? I'm going to take this man's store from him that he's operated with his family for 100 years because somebody somewhere decided that they needed a park here? Is that really fair? Is that an appropriate use of the most extreme power short of war in our governmental system is eminent domain, one might say. You're literally taking property away from someone. Those are the parameters of eminent domain that can be challenging. It's another reason that governments decided there must be a better way to settle, to resolve how the property is going to be used than having to take it. There must be a better way because we don't even know when we walk into court if we're going to win. We don't know how much we're going to have to pay. We don't know if we're going to be able to tax people enough to get the money to buy this. There must be a better way. Go ahead.
Now, as the property owner who's getting the process against them, you get free representation, or not free, but it gets paid for, right, as part of the process?
In Florida, you do. And it can vary from state to state. That's, we'll spend another part of the class going a little deeper into eminent domain, but one of the differences between Florida and some other states is this one word in our Constitution, full compensation. Not just compensation. But the legislature in Florida decided that means pay for all of the attorney's fees, all of the consulting fees. It's a very, Florida is a very favorable state for condemnees.
I can't imagine you get good representation if the state's paying for it.
It's your choice.
It's your choice.
It's your
Your
choice.
counsel, it's not their public
Yeah.
defender.
No, it's there are constraints on it. Now there's a schedule, and it's guided by the amount of benefit that the lawyer achieves for the client. The difference between the first offer and the final judgment. It's a percentage of that. So eminent domain lawyers learn which cases to take and which ones not to take. But they do. In Florida, they pay. There's other concepts to pay other kinds of damage that aren't always available in other states. And we'll spend a little more time on eminent domain. This is kind of a flyover of eminent domain because I want you to understand the middle ground that land use regulation is trying to fill. It's trying to find that happy medium between anybody can do anything they want and let the market dictate what that's going to be, and the government owns all the land and we do with it what we want. That very broad road in between is where land use regulation comes. When eminent domain can be abusive, if it can be, local government can target communities to try to, on very unfair basis, on racial lines, on all different kinds of criteria. They can misuse it, which is another reason that eminent domain is overseen by judges.
Is it what kind of occurred in the LA area when the highways were being built? That kind of segregated people based on color, right?
Well,
There's a whole book on that.
there's a lot of studies on the use of eminent domain to harm poorer communities. It happened a lot. From the government's perspective, they might have said, we really didn't think about the impact to the community of having a highway come divide it, and that land, that route was cheaper than this route because the land value is less. So they may have said, we were just doing what we were supposed to do, which was try to bring in the project for the lowest amount of tax dollars. We didn't realize that that meant that all of the crappy projects were going into poor neighborhoods. I mean, you think you've got to lift your head and look beyond your desk as a bureaucrat, but there was that perspective. Like, we weren't trying to harm minority communities. We were just trying to get the project done for the tax dollars that were available, and that land was cheaper. You can't really argue. I mean, that may have been their motivation, it may not have been their motivation, but they didn't give sufficient consideration to the impact of the project on the community. Another situation in which eminent domain has, I think, has been sort of an abusive thing is it's called pre-condemnation blight. So the government starts talking about the fact that we're going to do a project, and they talk about it for years and years and years, and just the notice of the project in the community depresses the value. And then when they do come in to take, they're using appraisals that have been depressed by the announcement of the project to begin with. I've seen that happen. So can something be done, that's what we're talking about, short of condemnation to prevent harmful land uses and encourage beneficial uses? And that's the broad road we're going to spend the rest of the course on, which is traditional land use regulation. This is just a little bit more that we've already covered on eminent domain. So the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. And then the parallel version from the state of Florida Constitution. No private property shall be taken except for a public purpose and with full compensation paid to each owner or secured by deposit in the registry of the